Hello, and welcome to In or Out, the European Ultimate Federation's show about the European Ultimate Club series. I'm the host, Ravi Vasudevan. We've got a great show for you today. Last time we checked in with each other, we were looking at the results just after Spring Tour. And now, since then, we've had a few national championships, but bigger than that, we had Vienna Spring Break and Tom's Tourney, where a lot of results came in and definitely shook the ranking up quite a bit. So we'll get into all that shortly. But I'm not here alone this time. I'm actually going to be joined by the lovely Molly Wedge, who is also a member of the EUF competition committee. Molly is originally from Canada, but has been in the UK for a long time now. Has represented GB at the World Games recently. Has also played for Bristol Women and Reading Mixed, and right now is coaching Bristol Open and was actually coaching Bristol Open at Tom's Tourney. So yeah, let's welcome Molly onto the show.
Thanks, Robbie.
Molly, how
Nice
you
to be
doing
here.
today?
I'm doing well, thanks. A bit tired from the weekend. How are you?
Yeah, great. Me as well. Me as well. Yeah, how was your weekend? Let's not talk about results yet, but just how was your Tom's experience coming back from Bruges?
Yeah, it was great. I think Tom's is probably my favorite European tournament. I know that's maybe a bit of a hot take because people love Windmill, but Bruges is my favorite European city. It's beautiful, and I'm a big fan of the waffles. So I got 5 waffles this weekend with toppings and everything. So I've done well. Haven't managed to find my favorite waffle place yet, though. So still on the hunt for that.
All
If
right,
you
what
got
else?
any good ones, let me know.
Someone in the chat should definitely let us know. I'm definitely not the waffle expert here. Um, what do you like about Tom's? What makes it your favorite? I mean, it's a great tournament. Everyone knows that, but why is it your top one?
Um, I think, whenever you go to a tournament and people ask you where a tournament is and you say like, oh, it's in Venice or it's wherever, it's not actually in that city, as where
Hmm.
Tom's is actually in Bruges. So when you go, you're staying in the city and you get to see the city, which is really nice. When I used to live in Canada, we used to go to tournaments in Boston all the time, but it wasn't actually in Boston. It was like an hour west of Boston, in kind of a wasteland. So it's nice that this is actually in a city that you get to see.
Good, good. All right. So, yeah, you're also a member of the EUF competition committee. So you'll be able to help me dig into these rankings and give a bit of insight to some of the questions we've been getting about the whole ranking system. But yeah, let's start with asking you a little bit about your results with Bristol Open this weekend. How was it coaching the boys? You had a quite some shocking results, I think some would say, not expecting you to come up with some of them, and then maybe coming back down to earth after some other ones. What was it like?
Yeah, it was great. So it's our first club competition of the season, and we had trials like mid March. So we'd actually only had 5 trainings together by the time Tom's came around. And the structure of the EUCS season is a bit of a struggle compared to previous years because you can normally kind of like build into the season, and then whenever results start to matter, you've already had loads of trainings together, but we knew that Tom's was going to be kind of our main opportunity to play against lots of international teams. So yeah, wanted to like really hit the ground running. And I was equally surprised with our first day results. We beat Lafada on Universe in our second game, which was a huge win. Bristol's never beaten Lafada. I'm not sure if we've ever played Lafada. But yeah, really, really exciting. And there was a big audience watching that. So that was really exciting. And then uh, day 2 was less windy, which is maybe why I think that other teams were able to kind of keep up with us a bit more than they were on day 1. And also because we had 2 EUCS games on the first day, we kind of ran the team into the ground a little bit in those games. And then just kind of the way that the tournament worked out, it meant that we only had 3 EUCS games. So I kind of like ran through the roster a little bit differently in those games than I would have done in the other games, which is another like interesting thing about the EUCS tournaments where you can opt in and opt out. I think we were expecting more than 3 EUCS games, but we only got 3. So the way that we tackled those games was different than some of the other games. But yeah,
Josh King,
lots of fun, and the guys were stoked about the results. So
Josh King in the chat saying that they played Lafota at Euros last year and lost 15-5 in the first game of UCF. So they had played before, but the result was a little different that time
it's a
out.
big glow up. Yeah.
Yep, talk me through that. So you were coaching the team. You did approach the EUCS games very differently than the other games. You took that really into account. What exactly was it? Just tightening lines? Other things going on? How did you approach that as a coach?
Yeah, so I think like this early in the season, we have like a completely new kind of way of playing as a team. This is I think the first year the team's ever had like a fully non-playing coach. And I know that that's quite rare in a lot of club ultimate teams. So in terms of, I'm not going to give you any like specifics about our playbook, but we kind of just ran through systems that we're really comfortable with already rather than kind of trying to learn. And I think that if the season looked normal where we just would have, like EUCR later in the season and then Euros, we probably would have just kind of like run through the whole roster the whole weekend, and just kind of focused on learning. So we did do that in our non-EUCS games, but in the games that counted, we did have to shorten lines, and just kind of like, make tactical adjustments that we might not have otherwise done. Like, for example, like running zones longer than you would normally do them because they're not really working, but you just need to learn. That's not the sort of thing that we were doing in the EUCS games. And I suspect the other teams were probably doing the same, which is not really what you want to be doing early in the season, but just because of the nature of the season, that was kind of what we had to do. But I mean, it worked out for us. So I'm really happy with the weekend.
Do you have any tips for an underdog team going up against, I mean, not to be too shade to Bristol, but I think, like you said, nobody would expect Bristol coming out and beating Lafota. Is there anything as a coach that you could tell to another team that's maybe coming up against a team that how do you mentally prepare a team to play that game? I'm sure your players also maybe didn't believe they could win. What went into getting a win like that?
I mean, to be fair, a lot of our players probably didn't know what Lafata was going into it. We've got a lot of new guys on the team. One of our players, it was his first club tournament ever. So he definitely didn't know who they were. So I think not having that like previous knowledge of the team would have helped. But also I'm a big fan of not like buffing up teams before you play them. Like I've been on teams before where someone says like, oh, we're playing so-and-so, they're really, really good. I don't really see the value in saying that before a game. So I like to focus on like the tactical adjustments that we're going to make. So focused a lot on like our resets going into the game and just talked about the direction of the wind and stuff like that. So going into the game, thinking about more specific tactical elements than the team that we were about to play, because it doesn't serve the team any purpose to do that.
All right, some great tips here for teams looking to do that. I'm sure there are many people out there on teams listening, thinking about how they can adjust their pregame talks with their team going into those big games. I did want to talk a little bit about Toms. You mentioned about this whole EUCS thing with Toms. I think this was the first. Well, Vienna Spring Break was probably also like that, but I wasn't there. But one of the first tournaments where you have like some of your games count, some of your games don't count. You already talked about how you dealt with that as a coach, but now I want to zoom out and think about it from a system point of view. We've got teams talking to the EUF, some of them complaining that they weren't able to get as many games as they hoped they would get. I know my team, UFO, we played Spring Tour, and then we were hoping, when we saw the list of teams at Tom's, we thought we were definitely going to get 4 more games in, and we would get our 10 games, but we only got 3. So now if we want to get, we're not going to be in consideration for the EUCF, so we don't have to worry about it that much. But if we were to do that, we'd have to find a game somewhere else. Just what are your initial thoughts? I have some of my own, but I want to ask you what your initial thoughts of playing in what we can do from a system point of view with having, like, right now we just said it's optional. Every team can do whatever they want, and we don't announce EUF who has done that until a week before, so teams don't like try to game it. Everybody finds out at the same time who has decided to do it. What are your thoughts on this as a system?
I think my personal thoughts as a coach is that I'd rather just teams not be able to opt out. Like if you're signing up for a tournament that has EUCS ranked games, then they should have to count. And I understand the challenges with that in terms of like bringing maybe like like the lower end of your roster to a tournament. I know some teams in the UK like to split their O lines and D lines and go to different tournaments as like O line or D line. And teams like to do that early in the season just because it's really good for reps. And I get that. But other teams are in the same position. It's early in the season. So everyone's just a bit rusty and not really settled into their systems just yet. And then it's just really challenging from like a planning perspective. So if I'm just thinking about Bristol Open, for example, we thought we were going to get 5 or 6 games of our 8 games at Tom's, but we only got 3. So for the rest of the season, we're pretty much just going to get games with local UK teams, which is fine. But I think we would have preferred to have some games against other international teams that counted to help with our rankings. And it's really difficult to plan our season when we like that's what I thought was going to happen. And now we're kind of having to make some tactical adjustments for the rest of the season based on that. And I think other teams are in the same boat where they thought they were going to get more and they didn't. And I was just equally surprised at the list of teams at Tom's that didn't have it count for EUCS, who had, from what I could see, their full roster there. I didn't really understand why. And I know that like LaFada initially didn't sign up for it to be one, but kind of at the last minute was like, yeah, let's count this, which worked out really well for Bristol Open. But yeah, I think it's kind of like a weird thing to be able to choose whether or not it counts so late. Like I know that you've said, I think is it 2 weeks before that teams have to submit their roster?
1 week for it's 2 weeks before for the official EUF events. So like Spring Tour, Summer Tour, and Elite Invite. But for EUF approved, we basically wanted to make it as like we thought, because you weren't on the committee when we made these decisions last year. You've joined since then, so you'll be involved in helping us make decisions for next year. Which of course things can change, and we're learning. It's a first year's learning process for us as well. But yeah, it's 1 week before EUF approved events, so like Tom's, which is really quite late. And that's the one thing that I don't like, is that I've heard from some teams that are going, we'll wait to see, like for Windmill, for example, which is a bit later in the season. They're saying, oh, well, we'll wait to see what our results look like, and if we need to get ranking points, then we'll count Windmill. And that wasn't the intention of our system. But we can see now that by the way we set it up, it allows for that. So that's maybe something we have to think about structurally. Maybe an idea that I've had is to, if tournaments are announced early on enough, then maybe, and teams are announced early on enough for tournaments, that they should have to decide which tournaments are going to before the spring tour. So at least it's before the first results come in. We have to decide. There's something like this but that's gonna cause teams and tournaments to be a lot more organized to make sure that they can have all their lists of teams set before April, which I think some, like for Tom's and Windmill, of course they're going to be like that, but for other tournaments, that's why we kind of made it flexible. We didn't want to make specific rules for specific tournaments. We'll have to see. And if people have suggestions of how to fix the system, let us know. What I know is that, yeah, well, first I wanted to ask you, you're also, I think, somewhat involved with Bristol Women, who were a team that decided not to make Tom's count. Do you know what thoughts went behind that, since you think they should, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I think so for Bristol Women, I think it was mainly a roster decision. They didn't have huge numbers going because GB Women were also going, so they're missing a few players to there. And then I'm playing with Bristol Women this year, and I'm not back to competing with them just yet. So I think just like the smaller roster that they were taking, they thought it was going to be kind of more of like a warm-up tournament. And then it was also someone on the team had just gotten married last weekend, and it was two people's birthdays. So I think they really wanted to make it more of a party tournament for them. So it was more of a just going out and having fun. But I mean, in the end, they probably should have counted it because they ended up coming fourth, and they did really well despite having only 12 able-bodied players by the end. So they did really, really well. Yeah. But so I can see why they've done that. And to your point, I think it would make sense to make tournaments have to decide, or teams have to decide early on in the season before any results come out. But I think also you don't want to take away teams from entering into tournaments that they then won't enter into because it counts, and they think, oh, it's too early in the season, or it's someone's getting married this weekend. We know that half of our roster is not going to be there, or whatever. So it's
I see a couple notes in the chat saying if you want to get your guaranteed EUCS games, just go to spring and summer. Yeah, that's also what we put in there. You said if we as EUF we don't guarantee, but this year we were able to give every team that wanted to come to spring and every team that wanted to come to summer. Even if you wanted to come to both, we gave every single team a spot. So that's a very easy way to get 6 games. You get your 12 games, you're good to go. Of course, that's always an option, and we offer that as EUF. I know some teams don't have that luxury. They maybe couldn't get people in the summer because it's during holiday season or whatever. But yeah, EUF offers that as an opportunity. But of course, we want to make it as easy as possible. And if people, have ideas about whether they liked this or not like this, I know when we're going to get into the rankings, we're going to see some teams, like in the open division, I saw quickly that Chalk had all 8 of their games count. And some teams, I know Ketchup Women had 0 games count. And that's really like, we had all extremes at Tom's. And yeah, I see a note here from John Dock saying we'd ruin the fun tournaments if you made it mandatory. Top teams wouldn't go, or they'd go under a new names. The system is fine for year 1. Yeah. So again, we're open to lots of feedback. I think we've talked enough about this, but I just want to say, like, people that have been commenting about is the choices that I think we have, and tell me if I have another choice, I don't know, is we could tell teams that if you're going to tell tournaments to be mandatory EUCS, but then we're kind of forcing tournaments to be what we want them to be. And we said, no, we want Tom's people have been organizing the tournament for 30 years. They know how to organize Tom's. I don't want to tell them how to do it. They just allow this thing to happen if teams want it to happen. Or we could have more events that are EUCS only. But then, yeah, maybe people would stop going to tournaments like Tom's and Windmill because that's what happened in the U.S. I mean, when the Triple Crown Tour came around, there were lots of fun tournaments that top club teams would go to, but they basically had to stop going to that because they had all their required tournaments and they wanted to get their sanctioned games in. So we wanted to kind of have a compromise where tournaments could still be what they are, but teams that wanted to count. But we're going to have to figure out how we strike that balance in the future. I think we're going to move on to the rankings unless you have any other final thoughts on this, Molly, or I think you've gotten everything.
No, yeah, just to reiterate, like, I think the biggest problem currently is just that teams can decide after they've already seen results of other teams and their own results. I'd heard a team say that they did really, really well at Spring Tour, so they weren't going to count the next couple of tournaments they went to. And it seems silly that you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that that's a flaw in the system. So we'll see what we can do to work that out. Okay. Let's open up the rankings, and I'm skipping the mixed division because actually, since last time there were no mixed results since Spring Tour. So, sorry, mixed division, nothing to talk about for you. If you want to see what happened, how this ranking shook out, check that out in 2 weeks ago's episode. So let's go to open, start things off where you were actually involved, and then, so one thing I want to shout out is that we did add flags to the app. So people were asking me about this, and I did my best to add that. I think if you go back to the 2023 demo data, there's a couple teams that it doesn't work for, but in 2024, it's all there. So we can see our nice, pretty flags to see where teams come from. And yeah, so here's the new ranking. I'll just read it we'll go down the top 20, let's say. So Mooncatchers, who were not in first place before, we'll look at the evolution later, are now in first place. Right behind them, Lafota, 3SB from the Czech Republic, Clapham just joining the ranking algorithm. They got 6 games at Tom's Tourney, so they're 5-1 now in there at fourth. One Tribe, I think surprising a lot of people by being in fifth. We can get into them in a second. Ranelagh from Ireland, then Chalk from France, Chevron from the UK, Costa Rica Grandes from Rimini in Italy. Bristol, your team, made it right into the safe zone in green there, just above the cutoff. Right above XVI from Ireland, Groot from the Netherlands in 12th, Jet Set from Belgium in 13th, Frank N from Germany, Quixotes from Spain, and Bad Skid from Germany. Saskia in the chat is asking if the Tom's game between Sick and Jet Set Love seems to be missing from the ranking. Could it be a mistake? It definitely could be. I was running I had to go to work today. I ran the ranking afterwards. I did my best to make sure everything was there. Apologize in advance. If there are mistakes, I will rerun it, and there might be slight differences to the ranking afterwards when we do that again. So thanks, Saskia, for checking it out. We will look into that. But we're showing you to the best of our knowledge right now. So just behind Bad Skid, the teams that are just out. So this show's called In or Out, who's in, who's out, is no good. Just behind Bad Skid with a difference of 136 to 127, just 10 ranking points difference. Very, very close. KFK from Copenhagen. Ketchup Graz in 19th had a good showing at Vienna Spring Break, but that seems to be not enough to get you in the top 16. And then Heidi's from Germany. We'll go down to the top 20. Just looking at this, what are your thoughts? I mean, I think your first thought is probably Bristol sitting at 10th.
For Bristol. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting to see the difference in numbers for teams. There's teams on here who have 2 or 3 games and others that have, 14 games. And I guess maybe because I'm kind of an idiot when it comes to these things, can I ask you, like, what, in terms of numbers, like, are you better off having 20, 25 games? Or are you better off having 10 games? Like, does it matter?
It matters in that more games will more accurately represent who you are. So if you're a team that is thinking you're actually not a top 16 team, but you're hoping to get lucky and get in, then having fewer games might be better. But if you're like, no, we're a top 16 team and maybe we'll have an unlucky game and we want to have the ranking really represent who we are, more data averages out the outliers matter less, right? So then it becomes more the bulk of the data that matters. The more games you have, the more accurate is how I would say it is.
Okay. So let's say if I'm asking for a friend and you have a team that beat Lafada on Universe early doors and then just kind of like cruise the rest of the season, you probably just want 10 games so that game counts for more. Is that?
Yeah, that game will be a bigger chunk. I mean, this game. So the way it works is here's Bristol's page. So you see here your variance. You had a score of 646 in the Lafota game. So getting a nice win there. That was obviously your best one. Your win over Quixotes got you with 392, and your loss to Jet Set by 4 was a negative 172. So a huge variance of 646 to negative 172 in your rankings there. So if you want this game to count more, you should have fewer games. But then remember that this game will also count more. So you know it depends. If you think your average is closer to this game, then maybe you want more games. If you think your average is actually closer to this game, maybe you want less games. It depends. Where do you think you are, and how do you back yourselves? I would say.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And then in terms of, no, sorry, you were going to say something. I could just ask you questions all day about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like as the season goes on, do the games end up counting more? So like, do games at Elite Invite count more than games at Tom's? Do games at Summer count more than games at Spring?
They do not. So in the USAU algorithm, which we base this off of, they do. They have a recency bias calculation in their algorithm. But Europeans tend to like this kind of soccer table. Every game from the beginning of the season matters the same as the end. So from the feedback we got when we were running this, the committee that decided on what ranking algorithm to use, they decided they would rather have a completely even thing. Every game counts the same. So yeah, there's no recency bias in our algorithm this year. Could be something we change for next year. We'll see. So what else jumps out to you? I mean, you played a few of these teams. You know a few of these teams. How does this ranking look to you? Anything surprise you here looking at this top 16 in Open?
I mean, like obviously Lafada just won Tom's Tourney, so interesting to see them in second. But I know that is it One Tribe, the team that they had an early season loss to, that's
Correct.
A bit higher. I'm new-ish to the Open division. Obviously, this is my first year coaching Open, and I'd never heard of One Tribe. Sorry if there are any One Tribe people listening in tonight. But yeah, I hadn't heard of them, as where I've heard of almost all of the other top 16 teams. So interesting to see them in fifth there.
Yeah, One Tribe, from what I know, is another club in Bologna, and they're apparently attracting a lot of the stronger youth are deciding to play with them instead of BFD. And Bologna is such a huge scene that they're able to form two teams at an elite level. So I took a look at their results earlier to see what's going on with them. So you do see that their game rating, they did have a win of 15-9 over Lafota at Italian Nationals. And that gave them a rating of 1,000 points. So you saw your win over Lafota by 1 was like a 660 point game. This is a 1,000 point game. And so I was like, okay, where would they be if this game didn't count? Because we do know that Lafota was basically going O&D line at this Nationals event, or the 2 lines or whatever they do. So they decided to make it count, but it wasn't a full force team. So I was curious what would happen there, and I averaged their score, and I saw that they wouldn't have been in 5th, but they still would have been in 7th. So they're still a very strong team. This result definitely is pulling them up, but it's not the only reason why they're in the EUCF qualification zone. You see wins over Ketchup Grass 15-7 and 15-9. Those are big wins against a very good team that got to the won Vienna Spring Break last weekend. So yeah, you see that this is a strong team. Winning Costa Rica Grande is another very good team from Italy. They beat them at Italian Nationals as well, and winning over teams like Red Bulls. And you see losing to Lafota at Spring Tour 15-9 was one of their worst results, and the loss to Ranelagh coming down. So pretty high variance team, but still all their, except for the loss from Ranelagh, all their scores are above average. And yeah, I'll be curious to see if they can hold that throughout the season. They already have 8 of their games. They'll still need to get 2 more. I believe they're at one of the summer tours, so they'll still get 6 more games into the system. And we'll see if they can hold their spot or if they drop down. Chalk's one that I was a little surprised they ended up kind of this low, because I saw they got the early win over Clapham, which was surely their best game. Yeah. Oh no, actually their win over XVI 13-7 at Spring Tour was a higher rated game than winning 14-11 over Clapham, and I'll leave that to people to decide if they think this is an accurate thing to say that winning 13-7 over XVI is a better result than winning 14-11 over Clapham. But we'll see. We'll see how it. I think as Clapham's results rise up, this result will look better. Clapham didn't have the best Tom's Tourney, I think, especially with this loss. So once maybe when they regress to their actual level, this result might get pumped up. And you see down at the bottom, they ended up losing to Clapham late in the tournament. I think that was for third place, 12-8. So they got this big win, but then couldn't win at the end. And you see both games ending up making a count. So
with that XVI game, so the reasoning for that being so valuable, is that because of XVI's ranking, like at the end of last season, like basically what makes them such a high value team to beat?
So we use nothing from last season, so it's only based on this season. It's just that they're right now ranked 11th because of their performance at Spring Tour Grenoble, where they went 5-1. This game got dropped because it was a blowout, so they actually have only these pretty good wins. They have one loss to Chalk 13-7, but they've got these other wins. So and they're against teams that maybe aren't that high up right now. So I think when more games go into the system, maybe they're going to drop down a little more as these teams maybe change where they're at. But they had a really good single tournament. But of course, that's why we say you need to get your 10 games in. Maybe XVI are just very good this year. It's hard to say. So that's just the way it works right now.
Okay. And then another question for you, Ravi. For all the people in the audience who have been told the blowout rule at least 3 times and still don't understand it, could you explain that to me like I'm an 8-year-old?
Yeah. It is. If you go to the for people that are looking it up, if you go to the app, click on EUCS and go down to algorithm, everything about the algorithm is explained here. Some scary math, but whatever. The blowout rule is explained here, and I will explain it. I'll just basically read it out, and if it's not clear to you here, I will feel free to keep asking me questions, because everybody, I know that for the USAU ranking algorithm, this is the thing that is the most confusing and gets the most questions all the time. So the idea of the blowout rule, the reason it exists is because the maximum rating difference you can get between your opponent's score is 600 points. So if you beat a team 15-7 or more, you can only get 600 points above their average. So the point is, if you are 600 points, more than 600 points above them, that score, even if you beat them 15-0, that score is going to drag you down. So to deal with this, we add the blowout rule, which only comes into effect if everything is met here of these 3 points, which is the winning team has a rating of 600 or more points higher than the losing team. So you have to be at a position where blowing them out would drop you down in the ranking. The winning team has to win by more than twice the score of the losing team plus 1. So in a game to 15, that means a 15-7 game will always count. 15-6 and below can be considered blowout. And the winning team has at least 5 other results where the results are not being ignored. So, and if there's multiple games, the one that hurts the winning team the most will be dropped first. Does that clarify it, or does this still not make any sense to you?
Yes, no, it does. So for an example, if a team beats, like say there's like a 15, I know that 15-5 and 15-7 are basically the same score for the purpose of the blowout rule. But if the two teams are so like evenly matched, let's say that Bristol beat Lafada 15-7, that would count. Because
so a couple things. One thing, 15-7 always counts. It's 15-6 that might not
15-6,
count.
sorry.
15-6 is the limit. So let's say Bristol beat Lafada 15-6. Bristol beat Lafada, or Lafada beat Bristol?
Bristol beat Lafada. Because I understand
if you beat a team that's higher than you in the ranking 15-6, it is going to count. The only way it's not going to count is if you beat a team that's 600 points below you. So you're here, Bristol's sitting here at 288. If you the only teams that the blowout rule would apply to are teams that are at let's round you up to 300. So teams that are below negative 300. So you'd have to beat a team below forward and below. That would not count. And the reason that would not count is because beating them 15-6 would still drop you in the ranking. If you beat this team 15-6, it would actually increase your ranking, so that's going to count. It's only teams where if you beat them blow them out, it'll only hurt you. That's when it gets discounted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So
Yep.
if you're a team and you're looking at this list and you're looking to see kind of where that line is for the blowout rule,
Yeah.
if you were playing a team that is below that line, do you
Yeah.
basically need to blow them out in order
Yes.
to not have your ranking drag down?
Correct. Correct. That is the idea. So if you're playing a team that is 600 points below you, you want to get that 15-6 win. And even early in the season, you don't know where a team's going to end up. So if you're at, I've always said that if you're at 14-6, both teams should be putting power lines in, because the lower team wants to get that 7 to make sure it counts, and the upper team wants to get 15-6 in case that team's really bad, so that the blowout rule could apply if it helps them. The blowout rule will never hurt you. You should always want to get 15-6. Everything in this algorithm encourages scoring more points. So there's nothing here saying, oh, I don't want to get a blowout because that would hurt me. No, the blowout rule only is there to help the winning team. So I hope that clarifies things a bit.
It does. It does. Thank you.
I think I'm going to have to run through this every time, every show, because I think we're going to get questions. You're not the only one, Molly. I'm sure a lot of people really, really appreciated you making me go through that in detail.
I hope so.
Okay, so what else? So what I like to do is also look at, and this will be good for you, look at the cutoffs of in and out with the matchup tab. So who's at the cutoff here? It's Bristol and XVI. And I'm just curious, what do Bristol and XVI look like compared to each other? So we can look at the matchup tab here. We put in Bristol, we put in XVI. And you can see that the rating difference between the two teams is 12.92. And a universe point win, remember, is a 125 point difference. So 12.92 is like 1/10 of a universe point difference, basically. And so basically, this expected score. So if I were to take a team like, I don't know, maybe a team that's closer to you, a bit further from you, Chalk is expected to beat you 15 to 14.04. If I go to XVI, so I don't write that as draw. I still write that as 14.04. But XVI is so close to you that you are closer than an expected win of 15 to 14.99. That's how close you guys are in ranking. So this shows you the razor thin margins that can be between qualifying and not qualifying. So that's the first cutoff. Oh, I'm curious if you guys have any mutual opponents to see if that, no. So there's no, so far there's nothing to really compare you to except for the overall ranking. We'll see later if that pops up somewhere else. So now we got Bad Skid just making the cutoff. Now Bad Skid's an interesting one because they were, I think, way outside the top 16 last ranking, but because of Vienna Spring Break, which brought connectivity to Padova and the rest of the tournaments, it showed that Padova was much stronger than the other ones, so they actually shot up even though they didn't play any other tournaments. They just had that 2 and 4 ranking at Padova, which looked really bad when everything was separated, but when it was connected, looked okay. So Bad Skid versus Isno. Let's take a look there. So again, 9.59. So if we were to finish the ranking today and there were no wild cards, this would be the difference between qualifying and not qualifying for the EUCF. Very, very razor thin. And again, nothing mutual between the two teams. So that, again, as more data comes in, this will get more and more useful to compare the teams at these cutoffs. But yeah, anything else you want to explore in this open division?
I mean, just notably, there's not a whole lot of German teams in the top 10. No German teams in the top 10. Normally we'd see a Bad Skid, Wall City. Have they not had any? They just haven't been to any tournaments yet.
Wall City hasn't played anything yet. I think Wall City is only playing Elite Invite and Summer Tour in the EUCS system, as far as I know. Maybe they're doing something else. There's also that DFV Pokal and the German Nationals, so they'll probably also be counting those, like the German tournaments. But they will be entered in at Elite Invite, which we'll do a little at the end of the show. We'll do a little Elite Invite preview. But yeah, there's still a couple teams I think that haven't shown up in any of in some of the divisions. So this top 16 is not safe. There's some top teams that haven't come in yet, for sure.
Yeah. And then just going in the chat, Robbie, this is a question that I would also love to know the answer to. Well, so what if you have 10 games and one of them gets blown out?
Oh yeah. First question. I think what you are asking is about the 10 game minimum. Blown out games do not reduce your contribution to the minimum. So that game still counts in terms of getting your 10 games. It just doesn't count for the ranking points, if that makes sense. So it's not going to hurt you. Like, you're not going to get disqualified from EUCF because your 10th game was a blowout. That doesn't come into play, whether you're the losing or the winning team.
Okay. And then they've also asked if you play a tournament, or if you play a tournament with only blow-offs, no
Blowouts, I think.
game,
Yeah.
no game counts.
Well, like,
I
so
guess it
we
would be the
don't.
same thing you just said. Yeah, like they
Yeah.
would still
So
count. They just don't affect your ranking.
right, they count towards your 10 game minimum, but they don't count in the ranking. And we don't care. Like, the ranking system doesn't care which tournament anything is. Tournaments are not a thing. Like, tournaments don't matter. Like which tournament it came from. So yes, a whole tournament's worth of results could get erased, but that's only to the benefit of the winning team. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it's probably not to your advantage if you're going to a tournament where you are only getting blown out or only blowing out other teams. Probably
Yeah.
not at the right tournament.
Yeah, you're probably not at the right tournament, and if you need that to get your 10 game minimum, I guess then it's helpful. But otherwise, yeah, that's not usually good. Okay, anything else for the open division, or we can move on to the women's, which you're probably more excited about, anyways.
Yeah, no, let's move on to the women's.
So now you're observing this as well. I guess you are rostered for Bristol eventually, so you're going to plan to play. Are you going to be healthy by EUCF? Is that the plan?
Yeah, no, I'll be playing by UK Nationals in July.
All right, great, great. Good to see you back out there. So you're definitely have a keen eye on this and how things have shaken out.
Yeah, so I mean, first thing that jumps out at me is that Shout is ranked first, and they took a team to Tom's. And can you confirm to me that they did indeed get beaten 15-0 in a game by Ketchup? Is that right?
I can confirm that, and this is something. Well, I guess this is a weird platform to use to shout this out because it's a different discussion. It has nothing to do with the EUCS. They did not count Toms for the EUCS, and I could hear them. I saw them playing, and I could hear them cheering Cheetahs, which is the second team from BFD that is not Shout. So it seems that they applied as their first team, but brought their second team to the tournament. And I've seen this happen at other tournaments. It's happened at Windmill before, for sure. I'm not going to mention the team's name now, but yeah, I don't like this as this is not to do with ECS, but yeah, this is a show. I can give some opinions. I don't like this. I don't think if you're going to apply for a tournament and then bring a different team, I think that's really against a lot of things. And I think they even were a 1 seed in their pool, and yeah, I'm not happy about that, but that has nothing to do with the UCS, except that they didn't count the games. So yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I suppose probably good that they didn't count it given the results.
Oh yeah, that would have been very bad.
That team got.
And it was a different team, so they couldn't have counted it because they probably weren't players on their master roster. So okay.
Yeah, quite a huge disparity there between the top ranked team and when you're getting down to 11, 12, 13, 14, whereas in the open division, the numbers are a lot closer.
Yeah. Yeah, and I believe that let's check. The connections shows how teams are connected to each other. And when I did this last week, the open division I checked is definitely all connected. I wonder if I try to pull apart the women's division, if I can get 2 separate sets of teams, or if they're now are fully connected after Tom's. It looks like they are. It seems that Woof is connecting them as they played teams from both, because there were two spring tour events for women's. And it seems that Woof is doing the work of connecting the teams. Sick also doing a little bit of work there, and Hrut, I think Hrut was at the Grenoble event, and I think these teams over here were at the UK one. So now women's is all connected. So that is definitely at least put everything together, which is nice. And yeah, let's just run it down. First place we got BFD Shout, second place 3SB. Which, yeah, I think last year we saw East Block from Czech be the big dogs, and 3SB seem to be out there now. So maybe there's going to be 2 very strong Czech teams, which is really, really cool to see. First time on the women's scene this year. In third place, Iceni in 4th, Moon Cup 5th, Bristol down here at 6th. Ketchup, as we mentioned, didn't get any games at Tom's Tourney. Let me just verify that that's true. Yeah, we see they got games at Vienna Spring Break and Spring Tour Grenoble, but nothing at Tom's. LMU coming at 8th, Fabulous, Troubles from Poland, Box Vienna, Smog, Jet Set Love, Woof, Seagulls, Tequila Boom Boom in there. And the Jet Set Love games, yeah, I can see what happened. Probably they were listed in Tom's Tourney results because we get the results from another tournament as something besides Jet Set Love. Maybe they were Love Women or Love or whatever, and then it didn't get counted in the ranking. So I apologize to Jet Set Love if that their results didn't get counted in here. We'll have to re-rank it again, and Sick is down here, so that might rejigger the teams around this cutoff, which is sad because that's what we're trying to look at it in or out. But we're doing our best here. Sorry about that. So Jet Set, Woof from Bruges, Seagulls from Hamburg, and Tequila Boom Boom rounds it out at 16th place. Right after the cutoff, we have Sharks Ultimate from Barcelona, Dublin Gravity down at 18th, and Sick and Spice closing out the top 20. Two teams from London down there. So Molly, what do you like? What do you think about looking at this ranking so far, and what do you want to dig deeper into?
I mean, same comment I made on the open side. Like Jinx would probably be in the top 5 up there, but they must have not played any games yet. And Seagulls are ranked quite low for how they would normally finish at Euros. So obviously these are going to change slightly. It was Moon Cup that finished the season last year, ranked first. Is that right? When you ran your test?
That is. I will quickly take a look. I think that was the thing we put on Instagram, and that was I included Windmill results that time. And actually, this was because Jinx had brought their second team to Windmill, that every team that played Jinx got pulled down because of that. Because you play a strong Jinx, but their average was pulled down because of Windmill. And then Moon Cup was like one of the only top teams that never played Jinx all season. So that was really why they got part of why they got pulled to first. They just kind of avoided them. I think we reran it with only EUF events, so it wasn't the Instagram post. And when we reran it, Yaka and Shout were 1 and 2, and Moon Cup was third. So that got a little bit of corrected, but Moon Cup was third last year. First on the Instagram post though.
Yeah, and I think us seeing 3SB maybe a bit higher than I would have guessed, and Gravity is ranked quite low, and I suppose that's probably just the nature of these teams not having played many teams. And I thought about this, like if you're a team who just goes to say Spring Invite and then one of the summer invites, and you only end up playing teams that are in your kind of region, so say UK teams only end up playing UK teams that count, it's probably going to like kind of bolster your ranking or make your ranking much worse, just because you haven't played other teams that are ranked really highly, or you haven't played teams that are ranked really low, like low. Mm-hmm. So do you think that will affect kind of who makes it in Euros and who doesn't? Because like it's possible for teams that get ranked really high, and it's just because they haven't played very many or any of the top level teams. So is it possible?
Yeah, ideally, what the algorithm will do is say things like let's say some team only plays like here's where all the UK teams are, right? You see LMU, Smog, Bristol, Horizon, Sick. But the thing is that if some team only plays Sick, but Sick has played Hrut, you get kind of connected in a kind of transitive way. So your result to there is compared to Hrut based on what their result to Hrut was, if that makes sense. So if teams are on an island, then the algorithm really just doesn't work at all. But if there's good enough connectivity, you don't have to directly play teams to be compared to them in a fair way. The more connectivity there is, the more fair and the more accurate the algorithm will work. But we have to work with limited stuff. So we decided that's why you have to play at least one EUF event and have to get 10 games in. And yes, those EUF events are a little bit stratified regionally, but we see that the way, if we only took the EUF events into account, there would still be pretty good connectivity, because the way the spring tour and the summer tour shook out, the teams don't play the same teams in both of those. And then Elite Invite, some elite teams play one or two of those tournaments and then kind of connect everything as a kind of tissue. Because Elite Invite is totally European, right? It's teams are from everywhere. So, yes, in theory, some island of teams could be a problem, but in the way things are shaking out, as the connectivity seems to be good enough, in my opinion, that even if you only play UK teams, you'll still be fairly compared to the other ones, because those UK teams played other teams, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And do you think so previously, in order to qualify for Euros, you had to go to your whatever relevant regional competition. Mm-hmm. So, and each region only had a certain amount of bids, which meant that there was always going to be quite a high diversity in terms of countries that went to Euros. But with this system, it's possible that 8 UK teams make it in, and the women's division ends up being mostly just UK teams. I mean, it's unlikely that would happen, but it's possible with this system. Do you think that that's an issue?
That's correct. It's definitely something we discussed in the competition committee as when we talked about pros and cons of the two systems. The con is one of the cons was um, not guaranteeing diversity among countries at the EUCF. Um, and we thought about that a lot. And what we decided was because we're having these multiple European events that are on offer, which I think before there weren't really that many. There was regionals and that was it. Now teams have the opportunity to go to a spring tour to another and play other teams from far away. You can pick a spring tour that's further away if you really want to get the opportunity to play teams from all over. And so actually more teams have the opportunity with this system to play European level than did before. We have many more teams in the system than teams that went to EUCR this year. So yes, maybe EUCF itself isn't as regionally diverse, but we've made a system where there actually are more European teams playing at the European level. So we decided that on balance that was good. Of course, I do agree that it's a slight con that we could have uh, only GB and Germany tournament. It's mathematically possible that that happens, and that wouldn't be as cool for UCF. But look at the ranking and the way it's shaking out. You have Italy, Czech Republic, Netherlands, GB, Belgium. Okay, another GB team, Austria. So we think that maybe when Ultimate, 10, 20 years ago or 15 years ago, the countries were very strong. Like the big countries were very strong and the developing countries weren't as strong. If we look at the landscape of how European Ultimate has developed, I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that there are strong teams in all parts of Europe. And now that that's the case, we should want the best teams competing, the top 16 teams competing. But it's always something we have to wrestle with.
Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose with this system, you're always going to guarantee, well, not guarantee, but there's a much stronger likelihood that the 16 teams that are going to Euros are the 16 teams that should be going to Euros. Whereas if you have the regional events, if one region is really, really weak, doesn't necessarily mean that you should always have a team attending from that region if they're just not really good enough to be there.
Right, and to add to that, like it could be based on how strong the region was last year, because with the EUCF before this ranking algorithm, we had no way to see how strong people were during a season. We would only be able to decide how many bids a region gets from the year before's results, and it could be that your region was really weak last year, but all of a sudden there's like three really good teams that decide to form this year, and then that pushes out a bunch of really good teams that should be at the EUCF level. But with this year, no, it's all about, with this new system, it's all about how the games go this year. So like Hrut women, maybe the Central Division wouldn't have had as many spots, so they would have pushed out another, a team like Seagulls or something out, but now Seagulls are still in. It's not their fault that Hrut women formed this year, even though they had good results last year, right? So this allows it to only count for this year. Another benefit, I think, to this system.
Yeah, agreed.
So let's take a look at the cutoffs. We got Smog and Love again. Sorry about that. That's apparently Love's Tom's tourney results didn't get put in here. Smog and Love in the safety cutoff. They're also expected to be a dead draw, and at the moment, no mutuals. Maybe they would have a mutual game against Sick if the Tom's tourney results got included. And then Tequila Boom Boom and Sharks. Sharks also only having played Vienna Spring Break, but did quite okay there. And Tequila. Oh, sorry, I'm hitting the wrong key here. I have to type under my microphone. It's not so easy. So yeah, this is a bit further away from a dead draw. It's 15 to 14.98. So this is the highest high stratification of two teams on the cutoff we've seen so far. 15 to 14.98 expected score between them. And again, no mutual results to look at yet. So that'll be more interesting to look at in the coming time. Anything else you want to talk about in this women's ranking, or any interesting thoughts you have besides the ones you mentioned so far?
Mostly just between 16 and 17 here. Do you think you're going to get some shit for your algorithm for the team who's ending up 17th with less than a point of difference? I mean, you're going to have to back up your algorithm too. Yeah. Those 17th place teams.
Yeah. So when I say less than a point of difference, that means that would mean less than 1 point per game they played. So you would be like, you'd have to score one more point every game you played. That would be 120. That would be about 125 points difference. But a single point in a single game wouldn't raise you 125 points. That would maybe raise you, but it could be the difference. It could be that 1 point in one game. This difference between negative 1.2 and 7.53. That is like super close. So it could be that if Smog had scored one more point in any game, or one fewer points in any game, or Jet Set Live scored one more points in any game, that would have flipped it. But yeah, you just gotta play all your points, and that is gonna be where people are gonna complain, I'm sure, because which algorithm we decide to use. I mean, we use the USAU algorithm. You could have used a different ranking algorithm. We could use the windmill ranking algorithm. That might change who the 16 cutoff and the 17 cutoff is. But so yeah, we're doing our best, and if you want to get in, just make sure like Molly did with Bristol. If you're playing an EUCS ranked game, maybe tighten your lines up, and you can't just play for the win. You got to play for every point you can, and counts, especially if you're one of these bubble teams. Okay, so I think that's it for digging into the ranking portion of the show. Let's take a quick look at some questions. I think Felix is going to put some questions up on the screen when we get them. We also got some by email. So here's the first question we got. Do you agree with us that by properly planning the season and making smart choices before the season tournaments, one can achieve a higher ranking? I think this is about, like, can a team get into EUCF by choosing which tournaments they go to? Yes and no. I mean, you still have to do well at those tournaments you go to, first of all. And second of all, of course, you have to go to at least one EUF tournament. So that's something we do take away from your flexibility. You have to come to one, and you can't. We intentionally made it so when you apply to tournaments, you have no clue which teams are applying to which tournaments. You give us your preference, and yeah, you could start polling all your friends or whatever, but you don't really know which other teams are going to put what they're going to put for their preferences. And then we do it very fairly based on preference, and we do not like try to clump teams of similar level together at the spring tours and summer tours. We do it, based on what teams want to do. So it doesn't let you game the system for that tournament. So that's going to be 6 of your games for sure. But yeah, I don't know. If Molly, does that answer the question from your perspective, or do you have any other thoughts on this particular topic?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like just the example we used earlier with Tom's, like I expected us to get 5+ games from Tom's for EUCS, and we only got 3 in the end. So despite my planning, that didn't go the way that we thought it was going to go. So, which is a bit unfortunate, but I think that the system itself, I feel like you shouldn't be able to plan what does count and what doesn't count, and have to kind of like strategically do it that way.
Yeah.
I think the best way to approach tournaments is just going in and playing as you normally would, and not trying to figure out which games count and which games don't count. But yeah, something to think about for next season.
Okay. If we play only spring and summer tour, do we stand a chance to qualify? And I know the question was a bit longer, but we tried to simplify it. I saw this question earlier. They were also asking, like, assuming that we don't have the chance to win the wild card at summer tour. Like, we know we're not going to win that, but we pick these 2 tournaments. Do we even have a chance? Because maybe we don't get to play against those big teams, and we won't do well. Yes, you do. I mean, if you go to a tournament. If you can pull my screen back up, Nemo, I had an example of this, which was, what was the team? Frank N, for example. They're 2-0. They had 2 wins, and they've only beaten Zuplatzersch and the Big Easy, which are 2 teams that are outside the top 16. So they haven't gotten a chance to play any big teams. Now, this is only 2 games, but if they had 10 games that were exactly like this at this moment, they would have had a score that put them in the top 16. So there are, yes, playing against, some top teams might have some advantages and disadvantages, and there are some people who have analyzed the algorithm to see where exactly you get the biggest advantage. But if you play hard in your games and you play at your level and you crush the teams that are bad, you can still put yourself in the top ranking. So absolutely, if you only get to spring and summer tour and maybe there are no top teams there, can you still qualify? The answer is definitely yes. Any other thoughts there, Molly, on that question? Or
No,
yeah.
nothing from me.
Does the ranking possibility reward teams that have more? Does the ranking possibly reward teams that have more playing options? I don't think the ranking rewards teams that have more playing options, but I'm not gonna lie and say that it's like that the world is fair. The world's not fair. Teams that have a bunch of teams close to where they live, their biggest advantage, in my opinion, is that they can get their other 4 games that they need by just having some local games. They don't have to travel and go to 2 international tournaments. Whereas teams that are more from further out, they will have to go to their UF tournament, and maybe they'll have to go to a second UF tournament because maybe they're off in Lithuania and there's not that many teams in the Baltics that want to do this. So they will have to travel twice, whereas teams that have more options will have to travel less. I think another way this question can come in is like teams that don't get into tournaments like Tom's and Windmill. Are they disadvantaged compared to the teams that do? And I can't lie and say that like it's a totally fair world out there, and the UF has zero control, and I want to keep it that way over who gets into Tom's and Windmill. I would love to keep them running tournaments, amazing tournaments they've run the way they've run them. So, and surely it's not fair that some teams just won't be able to go to those tournaments yet. But the best we've been able to do at the UF is offer a spring and a summer tour and say, we will give you 2 European events. You will get your 12 games, and we know for sure you will get into those. And I hope that some other teams will start, like setting up some more tournaments. I think there aren't as that many tournaments going on in June. I think as people learn what the system is, more and more EUCS tournaments for teams in their region will probably start to pop up. But yeah. Do you have any further thoughts on this one or further follow-up questions from what I said so far?
No, just obviously we've got Elite Invite where only certain teams are invited. And that's kind of the one that EUF run that not any team can get into. And that one's like kind of not fair, but I mean, elite sport isn't fair. And that exists not just in Ultimate and every other sport, but it does, it's the way that USAU also runs their systems. They kind of have different tiers of ranking. And if you're in a certain tier, you get invited to the top level tournaments. And if not, you get invited to the lower level tournaments. It's just the way that it works. And it means that you play teams that are kind of more at your level, which I think is what should happen anyway. If the Elite Invite was 7 teams that were ranked in the top 10 and then 1 team that was ranked 30th, they're just going to get blown out and then games wouldn't count anyway. So I kind of think that that's the way it should be.
Yeah. And the tours are more what you're saying. We stratify that all the way. There are some top teams, there are some bottom teams, and then we have, like you said, 1 event. I think it's okay to have 1 event that is that is elite. I think most people agree. I think Elite Invite's pretty sweet, and we're going to have that next week. All right. In your predictions, we're going to talk about my predictions. Okay, that's a whole other thing. Do you think the teams playing an Elite Invite, regardless of the number of wins and losses, but facing stronger opponents, will end up higher in the ranking than the teams that performed well at the Spring Tour?
This is very similar to the last question about does it benefit you, basically, to go to this tournament that others don't get invited to?
Yeah. But in my prediction, will they do better? Yeah, because they're
better.
They were a top 8 UCF team last year, so that means they're probably pretty good. And like a team that I think the team that finishes, for example, at one an open, I think, and I could eat my words, I could be totally wrong. I predict that Jet Set will be a bit worse than they were last year. I think last year they had a pretty hot year, and they got into the top 8, and they're going to be going to Elite Invite. And I think maybe a team like Chalk, who has been having good results outside of Elite Invite but didn't make top 8 last year, I think they could probably end up higher than Jet Set. So I don't think it's like every team at Elite Invite is going to be higher than every other team. You're not guaranteed to get top 8 just because you went to Elite Invite. If you go to Elite Invite and you have a terrible team and you get blown out all your games, none of them are going to count, like you said. So no, that's not going to help you. But the Elite Invite teams are good. That's why they're invited. So yes, they're probably going to do pretty well at the ranking as well. Yeah. What happens if you forfeits a game during an EUF tournament? don't think we've actually fully considered that yet, and what we should do about that. If team forfeits a game, well, I do know that they would probably be disqualified from the EUCF because I think that's something we do know, and I can't say this for sure, but I think we would still count the game towards the other team as a counted game for their 10 games, but probably wouldn't put like a we wouldn't want to put like a 15-0 or something that's gonna super charge the ranking. How I would want to handle that, and again, I'll say that this is how I want to handle it. I don't have the firm answer right now. If Nemo knows what the firm answer we decided on is, please put it in the private chat, and I'll give that one. My public chat would my opinion would be that we should disqualify the team that forfeits, because if you're at an EUF event, you have to play your games unless there was some really good justification for it, like if there's some really crazy health thing or whatever. But normally, yeah, you'd get disqualified, and the other team should have that game count towards their 10, but probably not have it counted in the ranking. Does that sound reasonable to you, Molly, as a person in the system?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Have you thought about having Spirit of the Game count in there? No. I don't believe Spirit of the Game. I'm a huge proponent of Spirit scores. I'm a huge proponent of Spirit of the Game. I think it's very important. I love self-officiated Ultimate. I was on Deep Look talking to the guys that do the American podcast, talk about the EUCS a few weeks ago. They asked me if Europe is moving towards observers and whatever, and I said, nah, we're happy with the game the way it is over here. I like Spirit of the Game. I like Spirit Circles. I like Spirit Scores. I think it's a super useful tool to give feedback. I actually don't like Spirit Prizes. I think that giving a prize, I don't think the Spirit of the Game scoring system, this is my own personal opinion, I'm not speaking on the behalf of EUF. Spirit of the Game scoring system is a feedback mechanism to tell teams how they're doing and what they should improve on and what they should feel like they did a good job at. And it's not a good competitive tool because it depends on which teams you play, if they score teams a bit differently or than whatever. I think we're pretty good at understanding how it works in Europe, but still, if one team is more easily giving threes out than another team, I don't think it's actually a fair game to like win or lose Spirit. I think it's a very useful tool, and I think that's why I find it valuable. And I don't want to have anything and because of that, I don't want to have the Spirit of the Game score link in any way to anything that has to do with ranking or qualification. That's my personal thoughts. Molly, I'm sure you have thoughts. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I do disagree in terms of the observers thing, and I'd rather Ultimate be an officiated sport. But I started playing Ultimate in Canada, and I've played in the US, and that's just I love observers. But interestingly, so from the same person, they've also asked, how do you think the win every point system could affect Spirit of the Game? And to that, I would say I don't think it's going to change it at all, because I've been in many situations where there's been very good Spirit and very poor Spirit in games that don't matter for, they're just casual games or at rec league or whatever. Like, Spirit of the Game is, if you've got somebody who's really spirited, they're going to be spirited all the time. And if you've got somebody who's not spirited, they're going to be not spirited when it matters and when it doesn't matter. That's just the nature of self-officiated sports. I'm not sure if you agree with that, Ravi.
No, I agree with that. Well, I would agree that I'm sure there are some exceptions, of course. I think generally you're correct most of the time. I'm sure there's some people that in a game that counts maybe play a bit more win at all costs or whatever. But in my experience at Europe, actually, like I played at Spring Tour and Tom's, and now these games count, and I played at these tournaments when they didn't count. I found so far I've had an incredibly spirited experience this season, and this is the only season where everything is counted, and I don't know if those things have anything to do with each other, but at least it didn't make anything worse. In fact, this is, for my competitive Ultimate, one of the most spirited seasons I've had so far, and even though everything counts.
So. Yeah, I think it's just if you have Team A, because like the situation I'm thinking of is, if you're in like a gold medal game at some big tournament, and in the last half of the game, you see a lot more calls happening because the game is really close. But like, if a team is going to do that in that game, they're going to do it in an EUCS game. They're going to do it in another game. Yeah. So this, like, the EUCS system isn't going to change that, or it's not going to fix that issue or make it worse.
Totally agree. think we have time for a couple more, and then we'll look at Elite Invite. Oh, we got no more questions in the chat. So let's take a quick look at what's coming up this weekend, which is the big event in Leuven. So if we can pull my screen back up, we got Elite Invite. Okay, something is broken on the Ulti Organizer. If you click on a division, I think it breaks the site. So Bruno, take a look at that. But we can go through division by division. So we skipped mixed before. Sorry about that. We'll look at it now. Pool A in mixed, Deep Space, Disconnection, Tartu Turbulence, and Seski Distis. Molly, I don't know how much you follow the mixed division. Does any thoughts you have pop up looking at this pool, or you're not a big mixed division fan?
Well, I played in the mixed division last year, so
true.
slightly more of a fan now than I was. Interesting results from Deep Space in their first spring invite, I think, because they won Euros last year and were largely uncontested throughout the season. I think maybe expected a higher placement for them. So it'll be interesting to see how they do at Elite Invite. I think they were missing certainly some of the GB women who I play with. Some of them were not there. But yeah, I think this will be a really good pool. So when I went last year, we had Disconnection and Seski Discus in our pool, and we had very close, very fun games with them. And I think that'll be a really good pool.
Did you get to play Tartu at all last season?
I don't think so. Sorry if I did and I can't remember. I thought, oh, maybe at Windmill?
They were not at Windmill, no.
No, then no.
They have the likes of Helen Terra and is Jakob Tom here? No. Okay. Well, Christian Loritz and yeah, very, very good team from Estonia. So I think they'll be quite strong. We're a top 8 team last year. So let's go to Pool B, where Reading, your old team, is there at the top of the pool. Manchot from France. I know they're looking very different than last year. Some of their top players have moved to Seskidistis, so that should be different. Nulacht from Germany and Lemmings from the UK. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Manchot or the say German team, but probably a bit of a weaker pool compared to the other one. Reading roster looks very different this year than it did last year, and I'm not sure about the Lemmings. They're usually a bit of a wild card. I've seen them be a bit weaker, and I've seen them beat some really strong teams. I think they have a lot of potential. They've got some younger players on their squad, so it'll be really interesting to see how they do.
Yeah, the format of this tournament is that basically everybody moves onto the bracket, so it'll be just 1v4, 2v3, and so on. Last year, I believe it was in the open division that a whole pool won quarters. So it ended up being that one semi was just the 4 teams from the same pool, and one semi was the pools were really totally, even the 4th place of one pool beat the 1st place of the other pool. I don't know enough about the mixed division this year to say if that could happen again, but I think there's some chance that could happen here, that the whole Pool A beats Pool B in quarters. We'll see.
I mean, I think that's always the mixed division, isn't it? A bit chaotic.
Yeah. So now we'll go to women's. So here we're going to see BFD Shout, not the BFD Cheetahs playing as BFD Shout, as we saw at Tom's Tourney. The women from Bologna back here again. Moon Cup, East Block, and Jet Set Louvre going to be here in women's Pool A. What are your thoughts?
Do you know, is all this tournament's being streamed, right?
Yeah, I think actually basically every field will be on offer on Solid Sport this weekend. I think one of them is going to be fully produced with regular Ulti TV production and commentators on site and everything that you're used to. And there'll be another one that Ulti TV is also filming, I think, with a single camera, but there'll be a remote commentator. And then I think there's a VO stream with commentary and a VO stream without commentary. And there's 4 fields of the tournament. I think there is a production break for the Ulti TV filmed one. So there's like 1 game, 2 games per day that aren't filmed. But aside from that, every game will be filmed in some way at different quality levels. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think East Block have shown up on the rankings yet, have they? So it'll be really interesting to see how they do. They're a really fun team to watch, very fun team to play.
Yeah, they were at Vienna Spring Break, but they didn't count it. I think they were also using it as a prep tournament. So, yeah, we see their roster here. Yeah, they're definitely gonna be fun. Cool. What would be your thoughts here about how this pool would shake out?
I'm not too familiar with Love, and I won't say anything because I've already got one message in the chat from, I think, someone on 3SB when I made my comment earlier. For the fun of it, I'm going to say East Block takes the pool with Bloom Cup second and Shout third.
Shout third. Shout third. It's a bold statement. Bold statement. All right, then we go to Pool B, where we've got Jinx Midnight, Yaka, Iceni, and Box from Vienna.
Yeah, another good pool. I mean, I'm super excited to watch the women's division. I think the women's division is always the most exciting division to watch. Not biased at all. It'll be nice. It'll be interesting to see Jinx in action for the first time. Do you know why they've changed their name?
Yes,
Jinx
because
Midnight.
they... well, I think they've always had Jinx Midnight and Jinx Blue, which is their A and B team. And when we ran the ranking algorithm, they were pulled down hugely because they went as Jinx and Jinx. And I think now they realized, okay, we actually need to notify, now that people are kind of looking at regular tournaments and seeing, what the team name is, we should go as our full team name. And so they're going as Jinx Midnight, which is only their A team. And yeah, they won't have, if Jinx Blue goes to some other tournament, that's not going to change how they are seen as a club, let's say.
Yeah, I would imagine Jinx would take this pool relatively comfortably. And then second could go to any one of those teams. Iceni has been inconsistent at international tournaments in the last few years, but they've been doing well in the last year or so. So
okay, saying Jinx comfortable over Yaka. I mean, that's not always been. I mean, I know Jinx got to the final last year, but Yaka's looking all right.
Yeah, I'm not going to change my mind on that.
Well, we'll see. We got to play out the games. I'm excited. That's one I'm excited to see. I want to see that game, and if it's a big win, you'll be right. But I hope for a closer one there. All right.
Hopefully, I'm not making too many enemies in this podcast.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I've been doing this for years. They all like what we talk. They'll talk a little trash to you, but they're happy to even be talked about, even if you're saying negative things about them. All right, Open Division. We got Clapham, Wall City, Gentle, and Jet Set Open. Yeah, my first thoughts on this one are we haven't seen Wall yet, so I'm curious what we'll see out of Wall. I do know, I think if we click in here, a few interesting names have been added to Wall, which Andre Riedlo, which is a top Czech player, has played for Fui and 3SB for a long time, is now been added to the team. Ferdia Rogers from Ranelagh has moved over there as well, and they have most of their top players, except for Aaron Wolf, who has moved over to the States, I believe, playing in Seattle this year. So this team's going to be very strong, I think, and I'm curious if they can do something to Clapham. I think I do know that Clapham has a wedding this weekend, so they will not be at full strength, just as they weren't at full strength at Tom's. They basically came with D-line plus captains to Tom's and decided to make a count, and this will be, I guess, people not going to the wedding that weren't invited to the wedding or go to this one. So, yeah, we see the Clapham roster here. You'll see it's a bit of a smaller roster.
Very small roster, yeah.
Very small roster. We don't see Justin Ford. We don't see, quite some other of the top players that you know. We do see Connor McHale there. So there are some of the guys that you know, but definitely not the full strength Clapham. But I still know they're going to be very strong. So this could be an opportunity for Wall City to take this pool, and I think I'd predict they might do that.
And for again the non-knowing people in the chat, the Elite Invite, all of the games count for EUCS rankings. Is that right?
The Elite Invite is an EUF tournament, so every game counts. There's no option there. That's every game in this one will go to the algorithm. Yeah. Gentle, I know Toby DeCrana is over playing in the UFA now, but still a very strong team. They, I think, were also not counting Tom's, so they didn't have the best showing at Tom's, but I don't think they were full strength there. Will also be a decent team. Jet Set, I'm curious to what they're going to look like at this tournament. Dom Knight asks if Lander's playing for Gentle. Take a quick look here. I do see number 15, Lander DeCrana, is playing for Gentle. I don't think he was at Tom's, but he'll be there for Elite Invite. So there you go, Dom. Okay, that's it for Pool A. Like I said before, Jet Set, I'm curious how they're going to be this year. Yeah, I've talked enough about them in previous shows and other shows to know what my opinions are there. All right, Pool B, we got Mooncatchers, La Fota, Chevy, and Alba. So we'll get a rematch of that Universe Point final from Tom's, which was Really fun to watch. I don't know if you were still around watching that one, but quite a show they put on for everybody. Um, so I'm sure both teams will be hungry to get revenge, and Lafota probably upset that they got the win when it didn't count because Moon decided not to have last week count, even though Lafota did. Um, so you got Chevy and Alba. You're from GB. I'm curious what you think, how you think Chevy and Alba are going to stack up at full strength, where everything counts against teams like Moon and Lafota.
I think Chevy's an interesting one. They have very little roster turnover from year to year. But I mean, they pulled out the UK win last year, beating Clapham and at UK Nationals, and they've kind of revamped their O line to have a lot of kind of like the younger guys who've been playing for a while coming up. So they've been looking really, really good. Alba, I'm not so sure. I know Bristol Open has taken one of Alba's kind of main handler, so I'm not sure what their roster is looking like this year. And Scotland's very far away from Bristol, so yeah, it'll be
Haven't played them
interesting.
yet.
Yeah, I would expect kind of at least the groupings to be the same, with Mooncatchers and Lafada in the top two, and then Chevy and Alba in the bottom two.
Yeah. Great. Okay, I think that does it for what we're going to talk about at the show. Thank you all for joining. I hope the ranking app didn't crash this time. I don't know if people have been paying attention to that. I'll just take a quick look. I've been running my local version to see if we managed to survive. No, it didn't crash. It's working. So we did some work on the back end to make sure it survived. Last time we did the show, the app crashed because so many people were looking at it at the same time. Thank you, Molly, for coming to In or Out. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will have another show next week after Lead Invite to see how that has shaken the rankings up in all three divisions. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next one.